Faced by a list of geo-strategic challenges, European nations find themselves in a critical juncture. However, absent any concrete strategy vis-à-vis Europe's collective security, economy, energy, and access to critical minerals, alongside rising threats of domestic demographic shifts, increasingly erodes a sense of clarity on how European leaders aim to tackle immediate as well as medium to long-term challenges. Good evening, I'm Jonathan Hassan, and this is the 25th edition of TV7 Europa Stands. Joining us to dissect Europe's state of internal and foreign affairs are Dr. Rafael Bardaji, who formerly served as Spain's national security advisor, currently a CEO at Worldwide Strategy, Professor Jacek Czaputowicz, formerly the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, and last but not least, Mr. Timo Soini, formerly the Deputy Prime Minister as well as the Foreign Minister of our host country here, Finland. It's a pleasure to have all of you with me here today. And Dr. Bardaji, we'll start with you. An eventful start for 2025 is an understatement, and the last couple of weeks have been even more tumultuous with, of course, the events from the White House, the preceding events leading up to it, and the subsequent events that followed.
Yes, indeed. I think there have been the last days quite an eventful week. No? But I think in reality that the Europeans are now suffering from this kind of hysteria because they found the reality just in their faces. Look, you can have energy transition. You can have welfare state. You can have open borders policy. And you can have a better defense. But you cannot have the four of them at once. You have to choose, pick two. And now they are trembling because they feel abandoned by America. They feel threatened by an imperialistic Russia. They are entangled in a war in Ukraine, supporting the Ukrainian forces without any strategy and the state in mind. And they don't know what to do. They are now headless chicken in Brussels. No? What they do is proposing what they have been doing in the last 70 years. Spend more, tax more, and the people will pay. I think that's the wrong approach, and I think we have to come to terms with the reality, which is, yes, we need a better defense, but probably money enough is not enough for getting that. We need to preserve at all costs the transatlantic relations, knowing that Trump has little interest in Europe, has more global interest, including Russia. But that's our task. How can we convince the President of the United States to stay engaged in European affairs? No?
With that being said, I do think that Trump does have a keen interest in maintaining NATO, not necessarily in the current composition, but nonetheless, he is putting his foot down when it comes to expenditure. And Professor Czaputowicz, your country has been one of the leading countries for years in spending quite significant sums of money with a long-term strategy of facing, potentially, the Russian threat. But nonetheless, this has not really resonated in the majority of European countries.
That's right. I think there is a difference of threat perception is different. For Poland, for countries in the east of the continent, we feel a pressure from Russia. And indeed, we are ready to invest. Societies are ready to pay for our security. It is not the case in Western Europe. They are rather independent. They don't feel that pressure. Western Europe can lose importance, but not sovereignty, I think. So this is a different way of thinking. It's much easier to mobilize society in countries which are under pressure, like Poland and Baltic states, for example, or Scandinavian countries these days. But I think that we face kind of a change of a paradigm in international relations, and the European Union is not ready for that, not prepared mentally. The liberal world is passing, going, finishing. The new one is the order which is based on international law, on UN Charter, on sovereign equality of states. And there is a kind of a new realist on geopolitical world where power and interests are the most important. It started earlier, not with the election of a new president, when international society realized that we cannot push back Russians. So we are ready to accept changes, territorial changes, by force. So it's kind of a new, also example for other countries. And I think that President Trump, after being elected, he have to react to this new reality and play the same game as Russians do, or the Chinese. Therefore, we have very competitive world when the military power is important instrument, not earlier. And the European Union doesn't have this instrument. So this is a problem, how to adapt to this new situation.
Yeah, I think that we are facing a big challenge in twofold directions. The first is, of course, to somehow get Ukraine from the claws of Russia. But at the same time, Russia is in the claws of China. And it will be a catastrophe if Russia will be, in a way, invaded economically to make a vassal state of China or dependent on China. And that is something I think Trump is trying to do, that Russia and China wouldn't be acting as a monolith. And I think this is a big challenge which we don't understand in Europe, because at the same time, when this is happening, we should get Ukraine out of the claws of Russia. And this is a totally new situation. And we have been singing in the Europe, we are the world, we are the children, since the Berlin Wall collapsed. Only I think Poland and Finland has put the money and invested to a military. Other people thought that the US is going to take care of it. And as when I was a minister, it was also Obama's administration said that you should spend more. No, nothing happened. Trump said that you should spend more in his first period. Something happened. And under Biden administration, nothing happened. And now I think the alarm bell has hit 12, and now it's gonna be changed.
Indeed. Well, let's expand a little bit on the Transatlantic Alliance, because it is, of course, not necessarily in jeopardy, but nonetheless, it is in an all-time low when we're talking about the relations between the United States and other components of this alliance, including the second largest military, Turkey, that is, of course, on its own foreign policy, to say the least. But Dr. Bardaji, when we really dissect the different layers of what we can identify, the United States, as Mr. Soini just mentioned, has a very America first attitude right now. It is on a grand strategy level, the Kissingerian approach, of course, of trying to decouple the main rivals that are currently very much interoperable since 2021, and doing so by trying to pacify the weaker of the two, namely Russia, and therefore the United States is very deeply engaged in that, and it has been signaling this to the Europeans for quite some time. The Europeans, on the other hand, have been very focused on tactical approaches rather than an actual strategy that aligns all European actors together. And we all know that Sun Tzu statement of tactics absent a strategy is the loudest way before defeat. Are we on the course of defeat?
Well, I think the Europeans basically has been living in a fantasy world of preserving the supposed to be international law and respect of rights and everything. All the eggs were in the basket of the values. Now we have a president in the United States which is much more pragmatic and realistic. It's more from Thucydides than from St. Augustine. And I think we need to balance the two visions. Having said that, we have a challenge in the short term, which is, as Timo mentioned, we need to keep Ukraine out of the claws of Russia. But we don't know how to do that. That's the problem. And also...
So the European approach of just spending money is not going to help?
I don't know. I think on the opposite. I think we just bought the maximalistic demands from Zelensky. Say, okay, we want to go back to the 1991 borders. no Russia in our soil, and no Putin in the Kremlin. Okay, I think that's unrealistic. I think we need to ask for concession from both sides and create the condition for a durable and permanent ceasefire and a peace deal. Because spending money is only going to produce more casualties in the Ukrainian side and in the Russian as well, more destruction, but no gain in the battlefield. We have been stuck in the last year, just moving the troops centimeters one side or another, defensive positions, an attrition war, and we're not going to win by attrition. It's ridiculous, but we have lost our capabilities to produce enough ammunition in the last 20 years in Europe to combat now the capabilities that Russia and North Korea and China and Iran have. And I think that's a loose proposition. I think we need to construct the condition for a durable peace as soon as possible.
Professor Czaputowicz, I'd like to hear your take on this, but there is also a shift in Poland. Poland was one of the most vocal supporters of Ukraine for quite some time, and it started to shift as the leader of the European Union, holding the presidency. We saw the foreign minister travel to the United States, meeting with Marco Rubio, and lo and behold, during his meeting with the Secretary of State, the matter of Ukraine didn't even come up. What was happening there?
No, it was. We support Ukraine. For us, it's crucial that Ukraine is a sovereign and strong country. The problem is that we see that the only United States can help it. So we are on the side of the United States. We encourage the President Zelensky and his staff just to get an agreement with the United States. We don't think the European Union is strong enough and has enough power and energy and also will to deal with this conflict. But I see the situation that President Trump told the Europeans, okay, we negotiate ceasefire with Russia and you will take responsibility introducing your forces in Ukraine to stabilize the system and to guarantee sovereignty of Ukraine. The problem is, I think that I'm not certain if the Russians agree on that. They want to control all Ukraine. But it is very important that this challenge was taken by President Macron, Prime Minister of UK, and these forces will be presented. The coalition of the willing probably will be formed. And then President Trump have to prove that what he repeats, that Vladimir Putin will accept that. I'm not certain. So we'll see there are different possibilities of development in the future. Ukrainians are very skeptical. They think that the US will see what is the policy of Putin, and it might be no agreement in future. It's possible, but we have to try. I agree that to guarantee a peace on the condition that Ukraine will remain a sovereign state would be very important.
It is vital. Of course, here in Finland, many people remember the Winter War, the continuation war, the loss of Crimea, Karelia. It's still very painful to Finnish people who've had, of course, deep roots in this territory. Ironically, of course, the 44th Brigade that was in the forefront of the battle against Finland at the time were Ukrainians, but nonetheless, it was under the Soviet Union. Other times, different perceptions. How can we identify, however, the characteristics from the current point in time where we should ask ourselves, can Ukraine actually prevail in this context? Can it maintain a position that it demands all of its territorial sovereignty to be brought once again forth? Or do we go for the American approach of saying, yes, we're going for a ceasefire in the first stage, trying to figure out the new terms and conditions for the current climate, and then pushing forward where it's possible to potentially gain a new reality and not dive into a period of a long 80 or 100-year war, potentially?
Yeah, you put a very, very, very hard and harsh question on the table because we were attacked by Soviet Union, and as there is a same kind of situation in Ukraine. Russia attacked. They are the invaders. And should they get some kind of reward, then they attacked a smaller nation. But at the same time, I know that after Winter War and Continuation War, we lost 10% of our area. We lost people and so forth. When we are living down to earth, not in the heaven, so we have somehow to adapt, not necessarily accept, but adapt and carry on living. And it's very dangerous to say, especially here in Finland, that you are giving in something for Russia. But if we want the killings ended and some kind of peaceful agreement formed, it must be something new at the table. But then one characteristics that we Finns do know about Russia, they don't appreciate weakness. If you make concessions, then lifting up the sanctions, giving them all they want, they think you are weak. They only respect the force and strength. And you must be in a quite strong possession if you are going to negotiate the peace which will be lasting one.
Dr. Bardaji, when economies falter, usually the problems start to surface. And that is something that we're seeing right now. At a time when, of course, Ursula von der Leyen came out and declared 800 billion euros, which out of that is roughly 80 billion to Ukraine every year for the next 10 years, which is still less than what the Americans gave them per year.
Yeah, that's correct. But I think the 800 billions are basically thought to be spent in European defense industry capabilities to produce ammunition and other systems to strengthen our deterrents. Part of them will go as a help for Ukraine. But the problem to me, I've been dealing all my life with security and military issues. If we want to change the reality in the ground in Ukraine, we need to change our policy. Our policy has been to provide Ukraine with enough ammunition and weapons not to collapse, but not enough systems that can hit deep in Russia because we fear the escalation. If we want to change the battlefield, we need to allow the Ukrainians to hit deep in Russia. That's the only thing I see militarily speaking. But we are not there yet because we'll be probably co-belligerent according to the Russians' eyes, and that will be an escalation. So to me, the problem is that the only strategy that could be applied to change the balance of forces in Ukraine is not acceptable and is not realistic, politically speaking. So what shall we do then? We need to adjust to the reality somehow. Yes, a sovereign country, but are we meaning getting back Crimea when we did nothing in 2014? Or are we telling the Russians out the whole country, or just from the eastern Donetsk and Luhansk provinces? So we don't have any answer to that because we just say, okay, we support Ukraine until the last moment, until the end. But that's not slogans, that are not policy. And Brussels, unfortunately, is just putting ourselves in a place where we are in a corner. No?
But much of those investments, obviously, are long-term investments. And just the last couple of days, we hear in the Joint Assembly in Beijing talking about prospects of escalation, not only with the United States, but also with Europe. And within that context, the Americans say, we are preparing for war with the Chinese in the event that they invade Taiwan. Now, if that happens, the United States is going to focus wholeheartedly on the Pacific, and Europe will be here to fend for itself. Now, according to a number of analytical reports and war games, for that matter, Europe is not ready for the immediate to medium term. And how can we get to that point without the right attitude, without the right policies, and without the right education to the masses that it takes sacrifice in order to sustain liberty?
That's right, I agree with this. So we understand in Poland, therefore there is an acceptance of society for spending on military. Also, there has been a change in Western countries. Recently in Germany, there is a discussion about increasing substantially spending, changing constitution, because it turned out to be an efficient instrument of international politics. I mean, military power. I don't think Germany is threatened by Russia, but to be important in the world, to play a role, you have to have strong military. And there is also discussion in the European Union to spend more. But this is a preparation to next conflict within few years, because when you decide about spending money, it will be in the budget next year. Then you have to invest this money, build the factories, and then produce. So it will take many years. But it's very good that this decision is taken. But the question is what to do next weeks. And the problem is, of course, Ukraine. So we have to give a chance to President Trump to fix that issue with the Russians, to impose ceasefire or lasting peace. We will have to accept some loss of territories, so it will be an acceptance of change of the borders, but we have to save sovereignty of Ukraine, to have democratic sovereign country, not kind of an ally of Russia, or not with the say of Russia who will govern there. So to defend that, we have to also mobilize within ourselves within the European Union to, if we are asked, to send the stabilization forces to save democracy of Ukraine and sovereignty, even not on all territories. So this is a challenge for next weeks. And Europe is not ready for that. President Macron tries to organize a group of countries, but why group of countries, not the European Union? European Union, majority of countries are not interested in that. Too much cost, too risky. They don't want to be involved. They are not threatened by Russia. So there are different arguments, but it demonstrates weakness of the country, of the Union. And France is a nuclear power. This is something, and UK, this is something which gives them kind of a braveness and that they can do it. It's very important. We'll see how it will develop the nuclear umbrella. For Poland, it's very important, crucial, vital to have it from the United States. But in case of some changes in American policy, there are two nuclear powers in Europe, one in European Union, France and UK. There is already a discussion about this. I think it's premature. I think that the US, they have interest in staying in Europe, particularly in Central Europe, Poland, Baltic states. And I can imagine even the development of the situation that NATO will lose relevance, but we will cooperate on bilateral basis because Poland has bilateral agreement with the US on stationing of the troops. Even I can imagine kind of a regional agreement between the United States, the Baltic states, Scandinavian countries, maybe Ukraine and Romania in the future, the countries which are very much interested in the presence of the United States, and they are ready to pay for this in terms of military spendings. So it could be one of possibilities in the future if European countries won't react positively to demands of the United States to increase substantially their military spendings.
I think that the really important thing is to keep a transatlantic cable at work. We cannot lose US from the Europe. And the worst possible scenario is that the US is going to leave and say that European Union, you take care of this. We cannot just by ourselves.
But isn't that the main issue? Because
that is the main
Europe
issue.
understands that NATO is vital as a force multiplier to the United States. And therefore, they feel comfortable in defying the United States when it comes to actually having some sustainable defense spending that will really be a force multiplier, not just semi-force multiplier.
Yeah, and that is where US is absolutely right, that we have free riders in our ranks. Hungary, many other countries, and many big countries as well, including Germany. They haven't spent a penny. And we up north, we are really fed up with all kind of bailout packages we have been sending to the south and to the west of Europe with housing problems, with currency problems, with banking problems and everything else. Now when we need here, up north and in Baltic countries and Poland, protection, then they are saying that, oh yeah, this is not a business of ours. And this is the problem of European Union. It's not a union of Europe. It's a union of bureaucrats. That is very harshly said, but that how it seems to be. And now when if we are playing more than our hand requires, the Russia will look that bluff, and then as Jacek said also that if we now make a decision to spend more. Where is the education? Where is the military? Where is the conscription? We have been living in the purple cloud, like Rafael said, for 30 years. And now, this, of course, now we know it. But if you did say this 2-3 years ago, you were extreme person, you were extreme and you were military crazy, you will be militarized because we need all kinds of other things. But what to do now is that if you are going to the Washington, you just have to bring something in the table. It's the party. It's not only that the host will give you turkey and wine and everything else. It's kind of parties that everybody is taking something with them, and then we are jointly going to consume and eat them together. And what is the first thing we can do is pay more and be more focused. And we must really. Trump is an individual. He likes to make deal. We must have that kind of leaders who can understand the way how he had to be handled and taken seriously. If we Europeans just laugh to the Americans, they will laugh us back.
Well, being transactional is the nature of the current administration in Washington. There are a couple of administrations here also in the region that are very transactional. Unfortunately, it's not in the right directions. But Dr. Bardaji, I'd like to ask you, since Western European nations, on the one hand, they feel a lot more comfortable than the Eastern European nations, particularly also because of the fact that they have some territory as a buffer zone, a strategic depth of field, as we call it in military terms. But nonetheless, they also have security guarantees, nuclear umbrellas. France is a nuclear power with a very elaborate nuclear doctrine of its own. The British are more similar to the Americans, of course. But as a nuclear expert, is that enough? Is the capacity of 2-3 nations within Europe to have this nuclear deterrent the best antidote for immediate challenges at hand?
I don't think so, sincerely. I think just with another example, when President Macron said 3 years ago that NATO was brain dead, nobody cares.
Yeah, everybody agreed with him.
When President Trump said it's an organization obsolete, we were trembling of fear.
Yeah, that's
why?
right.
Because America is the backbone of our security. That it is. America has now around 160 nuclear bombs deployed in Europe. If they were withdrawing them, I don't think the value of the arsenal of France or the UK will compensate for that because they don't have a strategy of extending deterrence. They are not being credible in the past, and I don't know how to solve this equation today. No?
Despite being strategic deterrence rather than tactical nuclear.
Yeah, but they have different doctrines, they have different visions, and they never put them for the service of the rest of the allies.
Right.
So that's one thing. The second thing is that, during the good old days of the Cold War, there was a central front in Germany, okay? The confrontation was there, and there were two flanks, the northern and the southern flank. If you ask now Italians or Spanish, where do you feel more threatened? Probably won't be Russia. Probably will be Algeria, Libya, North Morocco. So there are some politicians in Spain with some rights to say that every euro we spend in Ukraine is an euro that we don't spend in our defense against the South. So we need to understand that Europe is not a unified continent, particularly on strategic terms, and we have to deal with that situation also.
And also demographics, of course, and the influx of illegal migration that is predominantly Muslim, and therefore is also very hostile to local Christian cultures as a whole, but also the secular regime, so to speak, at large within various democracies. But
if I may add something,
ahead.
if we were really serious on defense, the cheapest way to achieve a better deterrence would have to build a nuclear bomb in every single European country.
And on that, if we may draw from there, the Islamic Republic of Iran is nearing towards that point. You just wrote an article, so in that context, in the event that the Iranians break out, and let's put aside for the moment the pledge both by the State of Israel and the United States to thwart those aspirations, also at the cost of a kinetic strike, would Iran's capacity to break out bring an end to the non-proliferation treaty on a global scale? And will that, as a result, also have a causality of multiple countries not feeling that that necessary protection, seeking their own nuclear deterrence?
I think it could be a kind of this development, but there is also a thinking and discussion within the theorists of deterrence that when you acquire nuclear capability, you become a more responsible actor in international relations. Look at India, look at Pakistan. It gives you kind of power, or you are sure about your security. So Mearsheimer, for example, for many years argues that it would be good that other countries have also nuclear power. But I am rather in accordance with these people who think that we should stop proliferation. But there are countries very developed like Germany, Japan, if they threaten, if they have a feeling that they have no other guarantees of their security, they may also go that way. Difficult to predict what will happen, but the situation demonstrates now that for President Trump administration, Middle East, particularly Israel, Iran, becomes a key problem. President Trump introduced maximum pressure policy, which was already implemented during the first term after withdrawal from the JCPOA. So we see how it will develop, but I think that Europe become less important, Ukraine become less important, but relations between, in the Middle East, particularly in Iran, in Israel, it's a priority for the United States. I think that we will have to demonstrate for the Americans that we can also support their policy vis-à-vis the Middle East, which is to create stable conditions for existence of the State of Israel. So I think that it is our argument to support that policy, to eliminate threat to Israel and to stabilize Gulf countries and other countries in the region or the region. So I think it should be our answer to that.
I personally think there is a somewhat of a divergence between the European approach to the Israeli approach, where the Israelis understand that they are part of an American grand strategy on a global scale, and therefore they're playing their part. Europe wants to play the American part without having the same stakes in the game, and therefore there is somewhat of a challenge on who is leading. Europe has an issue with realizing that it's a secondary actor rather than a primary actor, particularly President Macron. I know that not everybody thinks that way, but nonetheless, Mr. Soini, I'd like to hear your take on this as well, since the E3, namely France, Britain, and Germany, have up to, let's say, July to come to terms with whether or not to trigger the snapback, which expires on October 18th this year. The snapback under Security Council Resolution 2231, of course, would reinvigorate all political sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran, something that Tehran and the Ayatollah regime is very fearful of.
Yeah.
What is the European calculus here?
I think it's really important to understand two things. First, that we have a very, very shallow time window to do something with Ukraine. And that is, Trump wants a solution here quite quickly because he has his hands full in Middle East and in Taiwan and everything else. And to get the deal done here, it requires that we can support U.S. And also Israel's cause in the other area. You cannot pick the cherries from the cake. You have to be a strategic partner on the same side of the history. If you think what Israel has done for the naval ways to be opened for all of Europe all the time, guarantees that Houthis haven't been able to sink our ships or hijack them, and this all goes combined. And then now the big picture is also that when the chance arises, Iran was very hardly hit. Hezbollah was taken out more or less, and Assad was taken out more or less, who make it possible for Iran to have a strong influence on the borders of Israel. Now there is a change of situation. We have to have strategy how to press Iran that kind of agreement that Israel and U.S. can accept it and trust to it. And I think we need to back up that process from Europe.
I agree with that completely. The only issue is that when, on the one hand, you're supposed to confront the Iranians who are bad actors, not only in the Middle East, but they are active here in Europe. In the last couple of months, we had the Swedish intelligence chief once again warning that Iran is recruiting children, minors, that are affiliated to various crime syndicates in order to perpetrate political assassinations. That is an alarm that should ring in every European capital, and not only for the belligerence of nuclear proliferation, but also concrete belligerence. Dr. Bardaji, naturally, you're considered to be one of the top experts on this field, and I'd like to hear your take also on the nuclear file. But nonetheless, within the broad scheme of things, Europe seems also to start to invest in Syria, where the Iranians were pushed out following the fall of the Assad regime, and they're investing and supporting the lifting of sanctions from a al-Qaeda affiliate, despite being, of course, a jihadist organization. Is the support of Turkey and Qatar enough for Europe to say, okay, we're going to support them despite being al-Qaeda?
No, I don't think that's the right approach. But anyway, that's the reality it is on the ground. I mean, you cannot pick other actors. The government in Syria, however weak or dismembered it is what it is. So you have to try to deal with them in order not to push them back again to the wrong side of history. But it's not easy, and I don't know how long it will take for them to moderate themselves or for us to find out that we have been played out. But it's a complicated goal, in that sense. On Iran, I would say that we should learn from the Japan of the Second World War, because I think they are in a kind of similar situation. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor because not was being strong, but because they feared that they were becoming weaker and weaker.
The sanctions at the time were too successful.
Iran is feeling now weaker and weaker without Hezbollah, without Hamas, without the Palestinian Jihad, without the Iraqi militias. And we know that they have been rushing in producing enriched uranium in the last months. Whether they decide finally to push for a nuclear weapon, I don't know. It's an open question. But I think for the Western world, it will be the wrong message for the rest of the world if we not prevent Iran becoming nuclear, whatever it takes. I think that will be the end of the non-proliferation regime, though in Ukraine also there are some problems for that as well. But I think Iran becoming a nuclear power will be not only the end of the non-proliferation regime, but a big headache for the region and in strategic terms for the whole world.
One of the points that I think is interesting to raise out and important for this discussion is the fact that Germany this past year, for the first time, has deliberated whether or not to turn nuclear. something that I'm sure any of you would never dream would have happened before the Cold War or after the Cold War.
Well, we could have think that it was a nightmare, actually.
Right. But nonetheless, it is a fact that a country that has been pacified over the years due to the Marshall Plans and, of course, other reasons, is now considering this transition. And the tip would be Iran turning nuclear would be one of the reasons. But, of course, Russia has a bigger reasons than the Iranian factor. But I'd like to ask you, Professor Czaputowicz, going back to the Syrian file, Britain has lifted sanctions, France has lifted sanctions, two countries that are overwhelmingly swept with millions of Islamist and jihadist migrants, for that matter, that have impacted those cultures. Is that a calculus within their mindset of saying, well, that's not very different from what we have back home, so now we can support Damascus despite it being Al-Qaeda?
I think that it is a question of having influence somewhere by European powers, and it's an occasion in Syria when Russia left to be somehow present and to play a role in the Middle East for European countries. From our perspective, I mean Poland's perspective, when we look at Iran, the most important issue for us is that they are an ally of Russia in the war in Ukraine. So these Shahed drones kill thousands of them, given or sold to Russia, kill many civilians in Ukraine. So this is an argument in Polish society that it is an enemy. So this is the role of Iran.
Just for context, Russia and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Al-Qaeda affiliate supported by Turkey and Qatar, is in advanced stages of ratifying a return to the Tartus base and solidifying once again its naval base there.
Yeah, but yes. So this is a context. But I think that when I said that we have to be useful or somehow support the United States, I was thinking about perspective of Central European countries like Poland during the first term of President Donald Trump, when we organized Warsaw Conference in 2018, which supported Israel with foreign ministers, which started the process which led to Abraham Accords. So it was the beginning. So we should also take a responsibility somehow for international relations, not only to our neighborhood, also be active in the Middle East. For example, Poland also has a mission in UNIFIL in Lebanon within the United Nations. It's important to be present. There is a discussion in Poland. Should we defend our borders, or should we be more involved also in other regions, particularly in Ukraine? And the answer is, for the moment, very isolationistic. So we should defend our border. There is no social acceptance. But if we won't support our allies like United States, how we can expect that they will support us? So I am for more open policy of even countries like Poland or Central European countries, Baltic countries, Scandinavian. They are quite active, I must say, within the peacekeeping operations, but also to demonstrate support for international order under the leadership of the United States. West European countries, they perceive it differently. They perceive themselves as competitors for influence in the other regions and in the Middle East. So, of course, President Macron's perspective is different. He wants France to be important there. Okay.
Well, he thinks that France is still a superpower. And that is the bottom line. Look at Africa. France has been in decline while all countries involved there have been exploiting France's weaknesses. Unfortunately, since France is naturally a natural partner of the United States, of European nations, and Australia, others. But nonetheless, there is one more topic that I'd like to raise, and that is very significant. Also from Finland's perspective, Scandinavia's perspective at large, United States and others, the Arctic.
Yeah.
What is the situation there right now?
I think it has been on the whole on public field, but all the time much is happening there, and the Arctic will be one of the battlegrounds of the world because its importance in strategic ways is going to increase. That is why Trump is talking about Greenland, having Greenland, buying Greenland. I don't think that the U.S. or Trump really is especially longing for Greenland as such. But what they do want to have, that China will be out from Greenland, that the Greenland wouldn't be independent, and the independent Greenland may do something like Panama or something to take Chinese investments and take Chinese influence on there. And I think this is the big picture what comes to Denmark and what comes to Greenland. China wants to be a big player in the Arctic, and Russia is the way to these tables because Russia is in the Arctic Council with the Canada, Finland, US, and Nordic countries, and to have that game open in the Baltic Sea, in the Barents Sea, in the icy places. And if the new routes should emerge on the ways of Sakhalin area, and so it will be substantially shorter way to the markets on the west and go to the South China Sea. And if these new routes emerge, it's then straight away who will govern them. And China cannot do it without Russia, and Russia is a kind of buffer zone on that sense. And that sense also Greenland it's big, it's huge, it's the size of Australia or something like that. And it used to be green before the ISIS time, and you never know what will happen in the future. And it has 57,000 people in the vast area. Nobody can really protect that place. But in a way, to make a clean flag that this is ours, this is strategic to West, you cannot buy this. And why we are so worried about this is the way China have both the firms in the Panama Canal, they have Piraeus, they have ports in Greece and in Portugal, and try to buy firms from Kiel Canal in Germany and everything else. And that is the big strategic thing, to give the clear signal to Denmark and the West, you cannot mess up with Greenland. I'm not particularly convinced that actually he would like to have it. They have Alaska already.
May I intervene?
I'd like, but first, the point of Greenland is very important, and I'd like to hear both of you on this. And naturally, the main issue was the decaying critical infrastructure of Greenland. Denmark did not have the funds to fix that up, and therefore China wanted to bring in massive investments, and Denmark said, okay. Of course, it retracted after significant pressure of the previous Trump administration when he was the 45th, but that was a red signal. And I ask myself, with the European Union so good at spending money, why didn't it spend all that in critical infrastructure in Greenland?
Because the European Union did three things in the past: outsource our security to the United States, outsource our energy to Russia, and outsource our investment infrastructure to China. That's the way we were living. Now everything is collapsing, and I think the hysteria about Trump saying, "I want Greenland," something he said already in the first term, actually. If you go to Brussels today and you ask any European Union officials what is the problem with the Arctic, they will answer immediately. It's just saving the polar bear. They don't see the strategic game that is going to be played out in the region, no? Because we don't think strategically, and that's the real problem.
I think that's a very important situation developing there, but it demonstrates the discussion that geography matters, that distance matters, that also ports and routes, they are very important. But in Greenland, it will be within a few days a referendum. They simply don't want to belong to Denmark. They want to be independent, and soon we'll have a sovereign country, probably. They want to cut roots with this colonial Denmark. So this is their position. Nothing to do with the Americans. Of course,
well,
they are encouraged, but could be interpreted as the continuation of the process of decolonization. And what would happen afterwards, after they have independence? We'll see. They may unite somehow with the United States. They may have an agreement. They may join. There is many possibilities. President Trump, in his last speech to the Congress, he said that there are different possibilities. They are interested in Denmark. We'll see what will happen. But it was, of course, a mistake that the European Union did not accept Greenland as a part of the European Union due to fisheries or these things. So this is not a part of the European Union, and we don't have legitimacy, particularly after this referendum. It will be probably on 11th of March, if I'm not mistaken. So when you accept that the nation have a right to claim sovereignty, it is accepted in the Danish constitution, then you have to accept consequences. So when you hear to the people of Greenland, they simply don't want to be. They say they want to be independent, but maybe they would say that they want to have strong alliance or protectorate or different relations with the United States.
The colonial aspect I disagree with, since they are Danish dissidents who traveled there. How many years ago was that, give or take? It's like Iceland were dissidents of Norway.
No, but different.
So it's not a colonial entity that like the Netherlands, or Britain or France. There was a blood relation of people who went, explored, and took over a certain territory that was uninhabited.
No. They are, so to say, brotherhood with Indians in the Arctic, both in Russia and they belong to this community of. Now it's not accepted the word Eskimos. But this
indigenous people.
Indigenous people, so they are completely different. The prime minister is not a Danish descendant.
Suomi people and
No. Different race, completely. Like people living in North Canada, Alaska, and so on. So they feel one, so to say, group of people, race, how you call it.
But the fact, of course, is that Greenland cannot prevail without support of somebody. Is it Denmark? Is it US? Is it China?
It's going to be someone.
Yeah, it's going to be someone.
Well, we're drawing near to the end of our discussion today, and I'd like each of you to have 1 minute to not go wild, but provide your insight of what's going to happen in the next month and what should we focus on. What is truly important to focus on? Dr. Bardaji, we'll start with you.
I think it's very important for the Europeans to understand the seriousness of Mr. Trump's proposals, and that is vital for the future of Europe to keep America engaged in Europe. And if we, because suffer from a Trump derangement syndrome or whatever, make things worse, will be self-fulfilling a prophecy that we should avoid at all costs. It's an America abandoned of Europe.
Czaputowicz?
I agree with this. So we have to look how the conflict in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, will be resolved. We have to give a chance to the Americans. They have the power, a goodwill to resolve that conflict and react properly afterwards. I am not certain what would be the reaction of Russia. Is it possible or not to have this just peace? We have to try and support that process.
I also think that Trump can change a shift. Now he is getting Russia a chance to do something. And if nothing is materialized, he can take a tougher claw. I think that is also a possibility. I don't know why he have opted this strategy, maybe to wake Europe up, because we have been too, how would I say, easily going on the backbone of US. We haven't paid, we haven't been committed, and in every corner we have been giving a mumbo-jumbo to US. And I think he's fed up with that one. And we will be listened. There is still a strategic partnership. We have an economy of 500 million people. That's good business, but we have to engage, and that is number one. It will be totally disastrous if the European leaders would say that, okay, US is out, let's build our own system. We cannot do that in the military sense. We are just not capable.
On the NATO file, are we going to see an uptick of somewhat of a diplomatic clash between the United States and the rest, or where do you
I think that's the easiest portfolio, actually. I think if we spend more, that will satisfy probably Mr. Trump's requirements.
Yeah.
The other thing, seriously, is whether we spend better, but that is a second chapter. We are now whether we spend more, and I think I don't see, it could happen, but I don't see in the short term America pulling out of NATO, sincerely.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today, so I'd like to immediately also thank Dr. Rafael Bardaji, Professor Jacek Czaputowicz, and Mr. Timo Soini for all of your very valuable insights. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition, from here in Helsinki, wishing you a pleasant evening.
Shalom, I'm Danny Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, former deputy foreign minister and member of Knesset. Today, I'm very privileged to be hosting TV7's Middle East Review and also being a panelist of the various shows of TV7, which I find the most enlightening, most educating if you really want to understand the world, the global scene as well as the regional scene of the Middle East. It is worthwhile to watch TV7.